Week in, week out, we keep being inundated with security reports of arrests of alleged oil thieves and vandals. And just recently, the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited (NNPCL) said it uncovered 179 incidents of crude oil theft in the past week, meaning if the math is done, that's over 9,000 in 52 weeks. Alarming. But as the war on crude oil theft and vandalism rages on, with industry-wide security collaboration continuing to safeguard hydrocarbon infrastructure, it is concerning that these efforts still feel inadequate. Well, a video released by the NNPCL shows the incidents recorded between January 11 and 17 across the Niger Delta region, with 29 illegal pipeline connections and 55 illegal refineries reportedly uncovered within the period. Now, on Niger Delta today, we will not waver in continually troubleshooting the main issues of concern. There are insiders preventing the fights ongoing to end the scourge from succeeding. And how powerful are these insiders? And if we ask, how can they be defeated? If indeed they can be defeated. We're joined by an oil and gas expert, a senior energy consultant and analyst, conversant with the nuances of this industry. Dr. Wisdom Enang joins us virtually. Dr. Enang, you're welcome on Niger Delta today.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Good afternoon, Doctor. And today we are majorly concerned about issues of oil theft and vandalism. In fact, recently the NNPCL had attributed the recent fire incident in Rivers State to issues of vandalism. How can we probably bring an end to this particular issue? In fact, if we're looking at x-raying all of the activities, isn't there a way where these issues of vandalism, oil theft can be detected from the oil companies? They have sophisticated instruments and pipelines and machines. Can't it be detected from the industries or oil companies?
Absolutely. There are ways to detect oil thefts, but more importantly, I think we ought to be talking about how to prevent it. Now, the mechanism for me to, kind of put forward in terms of tackling the oil theft would be something like a PDRR, which is predict, detect, respond, and recover. So using some AI tools, you can definitely predict when things are going a bit south in terms of when there are certain parameters on the pipeline that once someone has tampered with the integrity of the pipeline, you can definitely tell that there is some sort of breach in your pipeline security. Things like your flow rates are going to tell you that when there's an unexplained drop, your flow rates, volume loss is going to be another one. Another one is going to be things like when we're talking about another thing is going to be things like perhaps drop in pressure when we're talking about how much pressure that the pipeline is seeing. So these are all parameters. And then the detect happens to be how when you then put all of these parameters together to tell, is it a leak, for example? Is it an accident? Or is it just a malfunction of the equipment itself? Or is it really, a theft issue? And then you detect it, create patterns to know, yes, there's a breach, definitely. And then they respond and recover. Whether it means sort of alerting the securities involved and initiating the repair, or also making sure that you contain the inventory loss. But in all of these, I think the most important thing that people underrate is the need for proactive measures. So proactive measures in terms of intelligence gathering, proactive measures in terms of checking to ensure that the communities are happy with what the companies are doing and they can take ownership, which is of course making sure that the host community welfare is being prioritized. So these are a lot of things. There are a lot of technologies, but technologies in itself that can help you detect anything will not solve the problem. The problem is obviously partly technology, partly the willpower, and partly inclusion from the host community perspective.
All right, Dr. Enang. Well, quickly, let me also take you up on this particular issue that is of importance. The resource exploitation enabled by corrupt local officials. How would you say that this plays a huge role in the issue of oil theft and vandalism, especially when we hear of issues that involve officials that understand what is happening within a particular terrain where oil is being exploited?
Absolutely. You know, when you talk about response and recover, without sending a deterrent to people that are carrying out these activities, there's no way you can actually get them to have a very compelling reason to stop. For example, when we get the tankers, what do? We blow them up, lose the inventory, blow them up, lose all the evidence for investigation. So you're absolutely right. It's still going to be a menace. Like I said, everything you can think about is going to be captured in that framework. PDRR, predict, detect, respond, and recover. And if we do not deploy that method in a comprehensive and very conscientious manner, then we're not ready to solve it. That problem you have highlighted is a very critical problem that definitely does affect the the success of tackling crude oil theft and vandalism.
Okay, Dr. Enang, just recently we got reports that a community in Enang, a local government area in Akwa Ibom State, discovered oil, that's specifically in Bioto 2. And the issues on ground is that we would like to understand, at what point do you start ensuring that the issues surrounding oil exploitation in a particular community that oil has been discovered are put at the front burner, in ensuring that at this point we begin to talk about how we can ensure there's prevention of illegal exploitation of oil from these regions? Does it start now? When we talk about surveillance and ensuring that we don't have incidences of oil theft in that area and taking care of the persons within that community where oil is discovered?
So when you discover your oil and you start what we call your facility development plan, one thing you need to know is you need to start, for example, a number of things in parallel. One of them would be your environmental plans as well. What we call the EIA, environmental impact assessment, and within that framework itself, you will need to start writing up your community engagement plans, because they're all part of the environment. So the community engagement plan details from cradle to grave, from starting the oil exploration business itself, all the way up to building up, you start the oil exploration business all the way to building your assets and then producing those assets all the way to, clean up, the plug and abandonment at the end of the asset life. All of those will be detailed. So there's a framework. And, the most surprising thing is that a lot of this framework is being captured within the paperwork that is supposed to be written as part of these companies. But do they follow them is a different case altogether. The other thing to point out is that, when you talk about the host community, the host communities, for example, you have to understand how do you best, represent their interests. And this comes down to some of the challenges that I have with the way the Petroleum Industry Act was scripted. Now, the Petroleum Industry Act says that the companies would have to nominate who, is going to be the one that, makes up the members of the host community trust fund and will disburse those funds, right? And, if you look at it from a kind of analytical standpoint, one worry comes to you: how do we make sure that those that would have protected the communities wholly are those that are on there, especially if the oil companies are the ones that have the prerogative to select members for the community to make up that trust fund board members. So these are kind of the concerns that you have. And when these concerns begin to trickle down, you look a little a second layer further, you ask yourself, what about the projects that are supposed to come as a result of taking care of the host communities? Have those projects, the funding, right? How many of those host community trust funds have contributed to by the oil and gas companies? Have those projects been operationalized? And what status are there? There is absolutely nothing telling you the stewardship of each company towards that host community goals. And so that's one of the big problems. But to answer your question more directly and in a succinct manner, we ought to have started some of these plans right at the beginning. And that would detail how you engage the community. Again, there are some backings within the law, of course, which means if you are coming in there, the law says you should set up a host community trust fund board and then set up members. But it is actually the implementation and the monitoring and the reporting of same that is the problem, not the intent or not the policy design.
Okay, Dr. Wisdom Enang, now for the issue with regards to ending vandalism and oil theft, some quarters are pointing accusing fingers at security agencies as well as some workers in the oil firms, accusing them of compromise and giving such as reasons why oil theft and vandalism has not been brought to a total end or complete eradication. Would you share in these thoughts?
I mean, hypothetically speaking, like, there are three barriers. There are three critical barriers: the people barrier, the equipment barrier, and the process barriers. And I'll tell you how they work. The equipment barriers are typically all the equipment that sends and report parameters that are being used to judge the operationality of the facility, as well as to see if there's any sort of breach. The process barriers are how you integrate the people and the equipment to be able to create a seamless flow of reporting who does what, when, how, where. Those are what the process deals with. But the people barrier is the most critical. It's the most critical barrier. They are the people are the custodians of making sure everything works. So hypothetically speaking, if the people barrier is compromised, everything else is compromised. And absolutely, but you see, it's difficult to point a finger because whoever alleges must prove. If you want to take it from a legal standpoint. So I like to say that the people barriers are very critical, and it will not be unconnected to the continuous oil theft problem that still subsists today. However, if you want to start going into explicit examples, then you will have to have some proof.
Okay, Dr. Enang, would you say that it is possible that technology can be weaponized to ensure that these issues of oil exploitation are done in such a way that it benefits, for instance, powerful nations? Do you still share in the allegations that powerful nations still benefit from our oil illegally?
I mean, when you think about the oil market, it's always been controlled by the cartel. And when I say the cartel, even OPEC is a cartel. A cartel is simply a group of people that, have rules, and they operate the whole industry by their rules. So the OPEC and non-OPEC members. And obviously that involves very powerful nations. What do you think happens when countries like, let's say, Russia or Saudi Arabia decides to pump more oil? They can crash the entire market by pumping a lot of oil into the market and create an oversupply. So definitely, Nigeria is just in the middle. At some point, sometimes at the detrimental end and sometimes at the gaining end, or depending on which of the cycles that we are in terms of oil pricing. But definitely very powerful nations do use this oil to the advantage, and they control the market. There's no doubt about that.
Okay, briefly, before we start winding down the conversation, recently the president had met with Ogoni leaders to talk about the cleanup exercise for the Niger Delta region. What would you recommend should be done, especially understanding the crisis that has been ongoing with regards to the Ogoni cleanup, and not just for Ogoni land? Looking at Niger Delta communities, a number of these communities are in penury. A number of these communities are suffering the aftermath of oil exploitation. What would you recommend should be done to ensure that the Niger Delta is properly cleaned up and the environment is being properly looked after, I would say?
Okay, so before I tell you what should be done, I think it is important to state that why we're here is because when we had the Petroleum Act that was governing the oil and gas sector, the biggest problem was the Petroleum Act did not explicitly state the amount of funding that needs to be kept aside for things like environmental cleanup, which is one of the precursors leading towards plug and abandonment at the end of the asset life. And so you had a situation where exploration was done for about maybe 50 odd years, and then there are no funding whatsoever to take care of the aftermath of what happens eventually. As such, the petroleum industry has come to say there should be plans for remediation and all of that. But the big issue is funding, because if you think about it, at the beginning of your asset life, your capex is high, which is your capital expenses, but your opex is low because your assets are new. They don't need much maintenance. But after you've repaid your capex, which is the money you get to set up your facility, you are pretty much making gain. By the time your asset is up to 60 years, you are not investing anything, so your capex is very, very low. Your opex, which is your operational expenses, is very high because you're always maintaining. That erodes your entire margins because you're not operating, and also because the asset begins to go down in terms of the produce based on the natural decline of the asset itself. Now, what is that important? The question is, where is the funding to be able to clean up these assets? So a number of things is going to happen. One clever way is for, during divestments, is for the IOCs to recognize the fact that they must discount, the price that for the sale of the asset, that must be discounted to reflect the fact that, okay, that discount needs to be used to take care of the remediation. So that's one way to do it. So if you want to sell it, something is 2 billion, you can say I'm going to sell it for 1.3, 700 million being the amount that you should eventually, you that is taking over the asset, should eventually consider and use for the cleanup. The other thing is for the government to start looking at funding options, perhaps loans or whatever, or using other funding options to clean up, because that's quite a huge project. But going forward, I think it will be important to legislate a certain amount that each company needs to be putting away to ensure that at the time that we're talking about environmental concerns, or we're talking about any plug and abandonment, that there is funding for the cleanup.
All right, Dr. Enang. Well, we know that the story of the Niger Delta is that of resilience in the face of what has been called systemic injustice. Now, there is a call for action, but then how much action do you think is necessary in ensuring that these issues that are very much at the front burner are addressed?
I think a lot of action is very important, is necessary. It's good that the president is looking at an integrated approach, taking traditional rulers, all the political actors all involved, and getting even the people, the militants and those groups to understand the need for us to be able to address some of those issues that will lead to, for example, environmental degradation. Because if there's bunkering, for example, that will further worsen the environment. So this is where they come in. Action is very important, and we need more work than talk at this material point in time. As I said, I've put out very clever ways that we can think about it. And for example, if you structure a sale to a company, you can give at a discounted price, but then mandates them to say, look, put away part of your operation expenses should be put away equal to the amount that was discounted over time for you to be able to do the environmental cleanup. Those are plausible ways to begin to fund these projects or initiatives without necessarily breaking the bank.
All right, Dr. Wisdom Enang, Senior Energy Consultant and Analyst, we appreciate your time and company on Niger Delta today.
Thank you so much for your insights, Dr. Wisdom Enang.
Thank you very much. Deeply appreciate it.
All right.
Oh, Jennifer, I mean, the conversations are really very, very mind-boggling. And we're just really concerned about the Niger Delta region and the many concerns that keep coming up when it comes to oil theft and vandalism of installations of oil. But as Dr. Wisdom Enang has said, I mean, it's the call for action, and I know that it is possible to
In
ensure
fact,
that
in
these
his
issues
words,
are resolved.
less words, more action.
Indeed.
Indeed, and we're looking forward to more action, especially for the Niger Delta region, especially looking at the impact of oil exploration in the region.